I thought I might just do a little informational video on getting started with sheep, just to kind of save you a little bit of headache, because whenever we first got sheep, the first 3 we bought, they were all bottle fed, so they were easy to handle. You just put them out there and they were good to go. The other set we got, they were like deer. They didn't want nothing to do with you. They just pretty much was put out in the pasture, run around the woods, and they didn't really have a whole lot to do with it. Nobody. So what we did is what Tommy told us to do. We got our stalls. We took the like temporary electrical fencing and just set up a little small area. Whenever we got them, we let them out of the truck into the stall, locked them up, put the fence up. We kept them stalled up for a day or two, and then we started letting them out into that temporary fence, and that worked really well. So what we did with that is that enabled us to stall train the sheep. It gave them time to realize that we were the shepherd taking care of them, and once they realize that, they're pretty much good to go. So long story short, the deer we had, not the deer, the sheep we had that were acting like deer, we'd already had the Katahdins trained. They were good to go. So we put them out there thinking, oh, well, they'll just mingle in with the herd. And wrong. So we put them out there. Within two hours, they were gone. And we spent 3 days trying to catch them. And you can save a lot of time if you just do what we just said with the stalling and the temporary fence. It'll save you that headache. Now, once we did that, we took those, once we caught those and put them back in there with the other ones, we stalled them up, had a temporary fence set up. A couple of days, they realized that, okay, I'm gonna mingle in with this herd, and we haven't had any problems with them since. Now, other stuff like pasture, so Tommy does paddocks. We don't have too many sheep on our property right now. Like we're barely scratching the surface with the amount of grass that we have. We only really have 2 months out the winter that I'm gonna have to feed them hay. So we just got them open grazing out there. But basically, if you don't have that type of land, or if you just want to be extra particular and make sure that they don't get worms or parasites, you break your pastures up into paddocks, and you move them every 3 days. On the 4th day, that's whenever the parasites and stuff start to come out from the poop, and if they're eating that grass around that poop, they'll get worms or parasites. So if you wanted to go that route, you can, and it would just make extra sure. How ours is set up, we got roughly 12-13 acres of pasture land that they're on, and I only got 9 sheep on it right now. And I'm probably not gonna get no more than 18. If I get up to 18, I'm gonna start killing them back and putting some meat in the freezer. But we have 2 different pastures, so they'll graze on the first pasture, and it's kind of funny watching them. They'll graze on one part, then they'll move. Very seldom do they go to the other pasture, but we have that. If that time comes to it, they'll just go to it. But the stall training thing was a really big help, and I definitely recommend that if you're going to do sheep. With the sheep, we've been feeding them grains. Now, I've heard some people say, no, well, you ain't supposed to feed them grains. You know, it ain't no such thing as a bucket in nature. It's like, yeah, well, grains grow in nature. They grain is a crop, you know. I don't know, we feed them some pellet feed too, but most of the time I just get straight oats, and we ain't had no problems with it. Now, am I feeding them that all day long? No. They've got pasture, they got grass, and I had a guy tell me, he said, you know, it'd be fine as long as they have grass or something in the grass that counteracts it. I don't know what it does, but we've been giving them a scoop, maybe 2 scoops a day of oats. And then it ain't done nothing to our sheep. They're fine. But like I said, they are grazing on pastures all day long. And it's been some pretty meat. It's been some pretty meat. But we're not doing anything. We're trying to keep this as natural as possible. Also with the sheep, we are getting away from using wormer. I'm not going to worm them. I'm not going to give them any shots. I'm not going to give them any antibiotics. I'm not going to give them nothing. What we have got is some stuff called Red Devil Eye. And this is kind of like an old-timey thing my dad was telling me about. And my uncle was trying it and he likes it. Now you can read the instructions on there. It says it's for hogs, and that's what they used to use it for. You mix this stuff up in hog slop. It'll also clean your drains out. But that's what we're using for wormer and stuff. And it's pretty simple to me. It's got instructions on there. And what you have to do is the sheep won't eat wet feed, so you mix it up, a 1/4 teaspoon per gallon. And you had to wet like some grain feed, and we'll get into that because I know that's a big controversial thing too with sheep. We'll talk about that in a second. But you basically mix that up with a grain feed, something that won't get soggy because they won't eat the wet food, and just kind of spray it over your food, or you can go out there and spray it on the grass. Here it is. Now you read on the back, home uses, but then it says farm uses. Okay. Now it's for hogs. You can sweetening hog swill. So what they used to do is old timers used to put this stuff in hog slop, and it'll clean them out, it'll deworm them, and it'll get rid of parasites. It'll slick them out, they'll look pretty, and they'll start putting on weight. Now we've given it to our sheep, and I can see their coats are starting to look better, and they are eating a lot more. It's done really well. It didn't take but a couple of days to tell it. So with the sheep, there's another thing too, because whenever we first got into the sheep, I was concerned and I didn't know, so I had to call Tommy and ask him. I had some sheep that were having, they was pooping logs, you know. They wasn't pooping pellets no more. And I thought they had worms, but they didn't. So the biggest tell on sheep, if they have worms or parasites, is they'll get this fat flap, like a fat sack up under their neck. If the skin's tight up under their jawline, they're more likely good. Now they're pooping pellets again. What it was is they were eating a lot of hay where they were before, and it was messing up their digestive system. They're eating nothing but grass. I don't have them on hay. The only hay they get right now is whenever I stall them up, I put a handful of hay in the hay feeder just in case they want to munch at night. I don't really know if they do or not. I lock them up and walk away. But it's in there, and they'll eat it in the mornings before I come let them out. Other than that, they're on straight grass, especially in the mornings whenever we have a heavy dew. That wet grass, they kind of moisten their poop up a little bit too. So you also got that side, that if just because they're not pooping pellets doesn't necessarily mean they have worms. It could just be their diet. And if you're feeding them hay, it's going to dry everything up, and they'll probably drink more water also, but they'll definitely have dry pellet poop. But the deer type ones we got, the Barbados ones that were like deer, they weren't on hay, and I haven't seen them get those turds like that, them logs, because they're eating what they've been eating, and they were from right down the road, so they're eating the same type of grass they've been eating. Their diet didn't change, so theirs never did it. That's about it. That ought to be a really good sheep kickstarting informational video if you want to get started with sheep. I can't really think of anything else. Now, if you're gonna have fruit trees that you want to plant, so like our fruit trees, if you go look, we've got electrical fence around it. We got electrical fence around it because if you have got your sheep out there with your trees, they'll rub up against it and they can kill those trees, especially if they're young. Now you can do other things like the pipes and stuff like that, but they'll probably still rub up against them. I wanted to make sure they did not touch them, so we put a 3-strand temporary electrical fence around our fruit trees, just to keep them out of that. Now, I did have electrical fence on some of the fencing in the pasture to first start with the sheep. They haven't tried to get out. Since I got the Barbados ones mingled in with the herd, they haven't tried to get out. They don't climb, which is kind of cool. Like, you know how like goats do, they'll stand on their back legs and they'll climb up trees to kind of like just kind of stand against them to get the leaves and stuff. They're not going to do that. And they really haven't rubbed up against my fence. But we've got so much stuff set up in the stalls that if they want to rub up against something, they rub up against a tree most of the time or something in those stalls. The only pasture we got barbed wire fencing. You can see it right here. I got a 5-strand barbed wire fence. That's what's closing in our pasture. Now, there's another thing with the sheep. I'm buying salt blocks. They aren't touching them a whole lot. They are a little bit. They really aren't using them. It's very seldom. We've got a natural creek running through there, and you're supposed to put them on. You're supposed to have that red rock mineral and some salt for them. Now, there's a lot of rocks and stuff run out there, and there's a lot of natural minerals in that creek. Me personally, being that I got the creek out there, I'm not going to give them any minerals. I just ain't. And I believe they're getting salt from that too. I could be wrong about that part. But they're definitely getting minerals. And I'm going to keep salt blocks out there. But as far as minerals go, I ain't doing it.